Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. I have some questions I want to ask you. Do you remember life before marriage? Do you remember life before you had kids? What brought you joy and fulfilled you? What inspired you and gave you a sense of purpose? Do you know the answers to these questions? If you don't, you're not alone. I ask these questions because one of the main points in life where we lose our sense of self is after life transitions. This is a big issue I talk with moms about. First, let me define what transitions are so we're all on the same page. It's a significant life event or change. Things like getting engaged, getting married, having a baby, getting divorced, gaining or losing a job, moving, or similar. And with each of these transitions, if we're not mindful and honor ourselves, we lose ourselves. And bit by bit, with each subsequent transition, we lose ourselves a little more until we don't recognize the person staring back at us in the mirror. I've experienced this myself and watched thousands of moms over my decades of practice fall into the same trap. So we're going to dive into the nuances of this today with my friend and mentor, Alexander Ohm, from the masculine perspective on how to support your wife in your relationship during the transition of having a new baby, the significance of communication, community, and flexibility during that journey, and an insightful book that's a must-read for men who are or are about to become dads. It's my pleasure to introduce Alexander Ohm. He's a storyteller, a community leader, and a coach of consciousness and business. He's on a mission to connect the leaders of the new earth, helping them to remember their own purposes and bringing those gifts to life in a tangible way that helps all heal and evolve. Over the past 10 years, he has directly helped over 500 entrepreneurs grow and expand through his own private practice coaching by hosting epic international retreats and as a partner in the Soulful Sales Company. Alexander is bringing his own message to life as a writer, photographer, and speaker. He believes that everyone is here on a purpose and that by approaching our lives through the lens of consciousness, we can remember our divine wisdom, heal at a deep level, and create true miracles in our lives here and now. You can find him on Instagram, alexander.ohm.official. Alrighty. Well, I am so excited to have my friend and mentor, Alexander, here today to talk about navigating the transitions of having a baby, especially in the first year. And so we're going to get right into it. So from what I've seen on social media with you and your wife, you guys seem to have a really lovely relationship. And so to set the stage, I would love for you to describe what your relationship looked like before having your daughter a year ago.
Beautiful. And first of all, thank you for having me on, Stephanie. It's a real honor and pleasure. I love your work and
so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. So before we had our daughter, my wife and I had this really beautiful synchronistic meeting, and life was just very fast paced, very magical. And yeah, that saw us move to a different country, moved to Mexico for a bit. We traveled around and went to events in Costa Rica, stayed with people in LA. So I don't think that we were ungrounded, but we were definitely transient in nature. And we're having a lot of fun. And we were also doing a lot of, deep work as well. While maybe someone would see us living in Mexico and working on our suntans, which was great and fun, or doing some spiritual retreat with Fit for Service, which was great. In between all of those moments was a lot of the natural frictions in relationship when you inevitably attract someone that likely perfectly fits some of your wounding or your pain points. And so a lot of, before our daughter arrived was a lot of doing that work with each other, finding our way, finding a way to successfully, quote unquote, fight. We call them growth sessions now, but, it's essentially, a difference of opinion or a difference of energy. And so we did a lot of that work before our daughter arrived, and we had a lot of fun along the way too. So hopefully that gives you a decent sense of what it looked like. It was a fun road, but a rocky road.
No, I get it. I think it's similar for a lot of us because like we were talking about those transitions, the transitions are when we meet challenges, right? It's a significant change in our lives and the energy. And you have to learn how to first initially navigate that as an individual, but then you're navigating it as a couple. And then you add children into the mix and it adds other layers, right? And so I think it's awesome, that you guys did a lot of the work before too, which is really, really cool. I love that because a lot of people don't really start doing the work until they're met with all these challenges, right? And then they endeavor into that rather than, trying to do some of it before. So I think that's awesome that you guys did that. Perfect. So I wanted to see if you guys did any, preparations for this major life change since, the birth of a child is so incredible and beautiful, but it changes your lives and your relationship permanently. And, let's be honest, no matter how much you plan for a baby and the changes, there's no predictability there. So, and it's so dramatic that you can't really, project what's going to happen. But yeah, what did you guys do anything in preparation for, having your daughter and how that might affect your relationship?
Yeah, very similar into the way that we do business, as you would know from, our company name Soulful Sales, is that my wife and I would see these major life events as an opportunity to expand spiritually or do this deep inner work. So when we discovered that we were pregnant, that definitely became the context or the container of, okay, what does this mean for us as individuals? What does this mean for us as a collective coming together as a family? And the work primarily looked like these daily conversations that we'd have, this evolving conversation of how are you feeling? How are things going? In the first 2 trimesters, my wife experienced a lot of that classic nausea, but it was a little bit more intense, almost all day long.
I can relate.
Yeah, debilitating at times, really. So I think right away we put that into a spiritual context of like, okay, she's releasing and purging everything that she's not bringing with her into this journey of motherhood. And she's releasing and purging everything that she doesn't want to pass along to our daughter. So there was a lot of that work. We started to, immediately, we were already focused on our health, but the importance of that seemed to, instantly leap tenfold. And we started to focus a lot more on what we were eating. We had a diet that was a little bit more animal-based. Grace was consuming a lot of natural animal protein and fat. Then there was also the deciding of where the birth would take place, which I think it was the main story or context that the rest of that transition revolved around. And so we were living in Mexico and we had found a woman who, was a midwife that was going to assist us in the journey. We were living in a place there on the ocean. It was beautiful. And just through following the synchronicities of life, we were led back to Canada. And in that preparation of like, okay, we got a new house. We didn't have any stuff because we sold it all. So we were acquiring new things. Dan and I were making big shifts in the business. There was definitely a lead up where the anticipation and the energy built of like, okay, let's make sure that we have the house. And okay, now do we have the people to assist us in the birth? Oh, no, we actually don't, because the Canadian system is something that we could, maybe it's a side tangent, but there wasn't any available midwives, which, was perfect because it led us to a couple of the women that actually did assist us. And it was a less formal role. It was more of a free birth with them assisting nearby as, birth keepers. And so this was kind of the energy or the intention, and it was exciting. It was upbeat. There'd be little flecks of, worries or fears that came in, and we dealt with them as they did. And that was kind of the lead up to the birth and the lead up to becoming parents, really treating it like an upcoming ceremony, preparing for that in our mindsets, in our diets, in the people that we were surrounding ourselves with.
I love that. That's so awesome, because I love that you had mentioned the idea of the purging. Purging things that you don't want to carry with you or pass on to your kids. I was the same with my first one. They call it morning sickness. I called it 24-hour sickness because for a good 5 or 6 months, that was me too. And I remember crying and feeling like I was going to die. But like you said, there is definitely something to come of that. And then when I had my daughter, 4.5 years after that, I barely had any, which is kind of amazing. But the interesting thing was, in between the 2 kids, I had done a lot of self-work and a lot of self-growth and trauma and emotional release. So it's really interesting to see, kind of that change over time. The other thing I kind of love is, how you guys were so invested in the journey, and the preparation and, how you guys pivoted when you needed to, which was really cool too. Cause I think, that's really interesting that you guys were looking for midwives and couldn't have any. And then, did like a rebirth style. I, with my second one, ended up home birth with midwives with her, but I birthed her myself. And I feel like that was a pretty cool, probably the top experience I've ever had in my life. Being a female and birthing your own child is pretty much like the pinnacle, it's pretty darn cool. So I feel like when you have a birth in that style, it's so transformative and it's almost otherworldly. So how was that for you and Grace?
Yeah, otherworldly is correct. And, as I recount the birth or think about different styles of birth, it does really remind me of an environment like a plant medicine ceremony where there's a way that you hope it goes. And then there's the way that it does go, just kind of like life, right? And so I know that there's so many women out there that would love to have, a peaceful and calm home birth, and it doesn't happen that way. And, I really do believe that it happens in the way that it should. And, we were really blessed for it to pretty much lay out in the way that we thought, as much as you can anticipate a birth. But yeah, we treated it like a ceremony, and the two women that were helping us hold space, they very much brought that energy, with them. And so we had a big pool that we rented that we did not use at all. And Grace, my wife, she went right into the tub where we had set up a bit of an altar space there. And it was such an interesting, she was kind of in early labor, and then there was a switch, and it's like, oh, we're in deep labor. And, immediately we started playing a little bit of, there was like an Om tone that we were playing in the background, and that played for the whole birth, just in the background, just this gentle oming in the background. Candles, we darkened the environment as much as we could as it started during the day and then went into the night. And as far as I could tell, because I've seen my wife in some different experiences, whether there's one of our good friends and mentors, Dr. Divi, who she facilitates these intuitive container experiences, which are hard to explain. But, there's some really deep work that happens there. I've seen her in plant medicine journeys. And as far as I could tell, she was, not in this level of reality, and she was fully in her birth. And we were really blessed to cultivate the environment where we could keep her in that brainwave state. We could keep her in that zone. And yeah, it was just very magical. Again, it reminds me so much, I have this context of the ceremony space or the plant medicine space, but it reminded me of it so much, where there was these waves, there was ups and downs, there was hard parts, there were beautiful parts. And I felt like her role in it was to completely surrender to the energy of birth, the energy of being a woman, to being this portal where life can come through. And my role, as far as I felt it or understood it, was to help ground the space, to hold the space and protect the space so that she could stay in that beautiful unfolding in that chaos.
I love that you are aware of that, because I feel like sometimes in the moment of birth, it can, depending upon how, like you said, there are many different styles of birth, and sometimes women want something and it doesn't happen, and regardless of whatever, anyone chooses, what's best for you. But I love how you were very kind of intentional in your thought process about how you approached it, because I feel like a lot of times, either by virtue of what's happening in the space or just, what society says, the dad is kind of like a second-class citizen there and kind of like a secondary thought. And you were very intentional about, supporting your wife and supporting the baby and supporting the process, which I absolutely love. Yeah. I mean, especially during that birth, when I gave birth to my daughter, I can't imagine, doing it without my husband there. I mean, literally, I was in the tub, as you said, you rented the big pool. He was behind me, he had his arms, intertwined behind my arms, and he was pulling back as I was pushing out. And it was yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine having done it by myself. That is amazing and absolutely beautiful. So let's switch gears to after the birth of your daughter. How did your relationship change, and what kind of adjustments did you guys have to make early on?
Yeah. The one thing that feels like, and I'll speak from the masculine perspective, that really bled over from the actual birth experience to the postpartum experience was this feeling of holding the space, protecting the space. And in the first few days after our daughter was born was the most protective that I've ever felt in my life. And my wife and I were joking. It's like, I feel so bad for some individual if this happened somewhere, if they like broke into the house of newborn parents, because that's just like Mama Bear and Papa Bear are like there. Yeah. So that was really interesting to experience. And I think that set the stage for, at first you have that energy of maybe risk mitigating or making sure everything's safe. And then those ideas, those fears kind of calm down. And then you're like, okay, well, let's make sure that she has the pillows, the blankets, the nutrition, the food. So that was a big focus for me, was just ensuring that she had what she needed. And I suppose that's the theme that's continued is, when she's waking up in the morning, that's where my brain goes to, is nutrition, which is for her and which is for our daughter. And we decided to co-sleep. So having our daughter in the bed has been such a beautiful blessing. And that's been a big shift as well. Sleep cycles. And, I have a feeling though that the sleeping is actually easier in a co-sleeping environment than
It is. I agree.
Our daughter might wake up for a little bit, and then luckily my wife is, open or okay to be feeding throughout the night. And so she cries for a second and then she's soothed and she goes back to bed. And some nights are great sleeps, honestly, which I think like some people don't talk about that being new parents. Like we get like a great sleep once in a while, which is awesome. Other nights could be a little different, but having her in our bed was a big adjustment, a beautiful bonding experience. And one of the biggest shifts or transitions that we've had to figure out or still are figuring out is, what does intimacy look like postpartum while co-sleeping? And especially because our daughter loves to contact sleep when she's napping as well. So very early on, it became clear to us that, okay, in order for us to cultivate an environment that's best for our daughter, we both as individuals need to be good and taken care of. We need to have our nutrition and we need to be, bathed and have our space for ourselves. We need to be strong as a unit, as a couple. And if we neglect those things, that we're actually neglecting our daughter. So I'm really grateful that that perspective was in our field. I don't know where that came from, but that became a big shift. It's like, okay, what does our daughter need? Then, okay, wait, what do we need individually? And something that my wife could speak to a lot more than I can is that in this first year, she's just been at home with our daughter, feeding our daughter. She's just been with her the whole time. She hasn't been away from her for a night. The most she's been away from her is probably 3 hours when our daughter's been with me. And so I know that there's days that that's felt really difficult of trying to figure out who she is as an individual, whereas I get to go and work and, go off and do these things where I can be away for a little bit longer. And I think it's easier for the masculine in that scenario to cultivate or recultivate this new sense of who am I as an individual, as a father, where she is, physically and emotionally and mentally bonded to our daughter. And they're they're beginning this separation process where our daughter is becoming her own individual little human. So there's been a lot of talks or conversations around that, of how can we support my wife in that journey? How can I carve out some time and go take my daughter for a 2 or 3 hour walk where, my wife can go and she can just paint, or she can take a long shower and a bath and recharge. So that's been the biggest area that I don't think we found the perfect solution. It's a day-to-day dance, but that's been a big transition, and one that I'm really grateful for my wife and her ability to communicate what's going on for her and what she might need. If there was a man listening to this, I understand the desire to be useful so much, and I could probably relate to them in that space. If there's women listening to this that are about to have children or have children, I would say to their partner, one of the biggest blessings you could give him is a knowingness of what to do. Give a task, give a mission, tell me, make food, chop wood. That feels so amazing as a man, and hopefully it's useful in the process too. So hopefully that gives you a little insight into that postpartum.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you touched on so many important points there. I mean, it really is so important. The communication piece is key, because not only, your wife, really in that first year, the baby is so reliant on the mom for all of its needs. Largely, dad can take the baby for a couple hours, but eventually baby's going back to mom, right? To nurse. And I remember that there are times like with my first one, I nursed him till he was 2.5. And I remember the older he got, the more it became of a mental struggle. And there were times when I was like, I just want to be me, and not have, baby or large toddler attached to my chest, and It's tough. It is tough. It's like separating the I from the we. And I love how you have, supported your wife through that, but also thought about yourself, because that's important too. And societally, we just don't talk about this stuff enough. We don't talk about, how do we support each other individually and then as a family unit going through this process and all of these transitions. And, it sounds like you guys are navigating it beautifully. And, to touch on the co-sleeping, for people who can do it and are willing to do it, I think it is an easier way for moms to get more sleep instead of having to actually physically get up and go to another room or get up and sit in a chair. I can't tell you the number of moms who've told me that they've fallen asleep in the rocking chair or fallen asleep on the floor of their, the baby's room. And I have suggested, maybe why don't you try maybe co-sleeping and see if that's an option for you? Because like you said, especially as the baby gets older, it realizes that it can just turn over and, mom's boob is right there and get my nutrition and my comfort, everything is there. And so I love that you guys are doing that. And you guys have found a beautiful system that has worked for you guys. And, I never want to place a stigma on anyone's, birth and life choices, because we all have, different factors going on in our lives. Some women, it's hard for them to nurse. And then other women, it comes easily to them. I did it, but it was a struggle for me both times. And so I can relate. There were times when you're like, I don't have the energy or the, mental capacity to keep going, but somehow you find a way. So I just want to make note of that. We're not judging anyone's birth choices or life choices. It's like, doing what's best for you is what you need to do.
Absolutely. And I think for myself or our family, it's really useful to have that spiritual context where everything's happening as it should. Like I was born cesarean and I, for some reason, wasn't able to take my mother's milk and had to have formula like pretty early on in my journey. And from, everything that we believe and have studied, that's like, I would have wished that went a different way for myself. But if those factors were different, I wouldn't be the person that I am today right now. And maybe I wouldn't be the father that I am. I wouldn't be able to have such a focus on doing this in a more natural way or doing this deep healing work. So yeah, whether someone can do a natural birth or not, or whether they can breastfeed or not, I completely understand. Well, I could never understand the true depth of what that feels like in the moment, but I could feel into how difficult that would be. And something that's really, really helped us is saying like, yeah, like everything is happening for us. Everything is happening as it should, even if we can't understand it or see it in the moment. And our job is just to do our best and to surrender to what is.
Awesome. And you gave me a good segue to my next question, which is, how have you felt personally? What have your emotions been, through this journey?
So many different emotions. I feel, I would say as a man, a greater sense of purpose and meaning. There's definitely, I felt like there is less time, and I'm very careful to say this, but I felt like there's less time to just do nothing and realize like how much I just did nothing in my past. I thought I was busy, but there's so many times for 2 or 3 hours, you're really just kind of doing nothing, relaxing or recharging. And there's no such thing as more time or less time. There's just time. But my life is so beautifully full now that there's a greater priority on a block or a unit of my time. Because if I'm allocating that somewhere else, I'm not allocating that to being with my wife and my daughter. And to see how much she changes in a day allows you to realize the value of just being present with your family, with your children, with your wife, with your husband. And that's always happening. But kids give us this beautiful, magnified example of the true value of time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so I've felt a deeper call to presence and urgency around the structures in our life of, advancing the space in career and finances to open the opportunities that we might want for our children, whether that's different styles of schooling or whatever that may be, and also different models in business where, and this was a really cool shift that happened for Dan and I because he had his second daughter very close to when we had our first daughter, months apart. And for Dan and myself, around the same time, the focus became time. And so that's a big part of what we teach and preach, but also integrate for ourselves is how do we get our time back to be with our families, to be with our daughters, to be with ourselves. Yeah. So there's been a greater intensity and a focus and heart expansion for sure. My absolute favorite thing is to just be, cuddled up on the couch with my wife and my daughter.
Yep. Me too.
And I usually wake up earlier in the morning, and then my wife will come out holding my daughter, and they both have like kind of sleepy eyes. She'll put her on the ground and she runs towards me now and wants to be lifted up.
Aw.
And there's nothing that compares to that. There's no yacht or Ferrari or anything. So it's really pulled me back into the here and the now. And it's really gave me this beautiful perspective that I don't think leaves once you become a parent. And I'm just really grateful for that.
It leaves a permanent impression on your soul for sure. I can relate to that when I do my trauma work. And one of the processes that we do, the first thing that we do is create a safe space. So, if you're in the process and you need to go back to that safe space, you can go there at any time. But my safe space, like we tell people, it can be anything you want, a place where you have felt safe in the past or a place where you imagine you would feel the safest. And for me, it's literally always like on my bed with my family, curled up all around us, snuggling, and that's what it is for me. Like just that unit and all of the amazing energy and love that it all provides. So that's my safe space. And I know what you're talking about in the morning when they wake up and they're so, kind of cute and cuddly and they come up and see you, there's nothing better than that. So let's go to, next question is, what is the one biggest challenge that you guys have had to overcome as a couple, during this transition, and how did you navigate it?
I think it is related to what I spoke to earlier, which is the figuring out how I, as the father and as the husband and as the current, provider, create the time and the space and the energy required for my wife to be who she needs to be, not just as a mother, but as a individual, as a woman. And, we've obviously done our best that we can so far, but it's the area that I don't feel like we've, perfectly solved it yet. But the fact that we have continued to have a focus on that and had the hard conversations around that and allowed her the space to express her emotions in that space, to not bottle them down, but to voice them, I think has been really powerful in itself. And it's something that I'm thinking about all the time. And it comes back to, okay, how do I create the systems and the time and the energy to do that? And that's one of the reasons why I believe that entrepreneurs probably make great parents, is because we're problem solvers and we don't take things as the status quo. If something isn't quite working for us, we invent a new way, or we attempt to anyways. When we trip and fall a couple times before we figure it out. But that has been the biggest point of friction of my ability to go out into the world and do my work, which I've been for the past 15 years intentionally designing to be fulfilling and exciting for myself. So when I go out and Dan and I go for a 3-hour meeting, yes, we're working. We're also having a ton of fun, right? And so I can go out and do work for 3 hours and go have a ton of fun with Dan, and we accomplish so much. But I come back with my cup filled with exciting stories, and she's like, well, I've just been here on the couch breastfeeding.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. It is. There were days that, because I've worked from home for the last 11 years, and it was hard for me on many days to watch my husband go out and then come back and, like you said, have stories and have had experiences. And that's exactly, I'm like, I've been sitting on the couch all day with the baby and trying to do work in between. And it's hard. It's hard to juggle all of that. And that's why I think it's amazing that you guys are so mindful of it and, and navigating this transition. And like you said, I don't think it's an art we can perfect. We can, I think, have the intention there and have the plan, but just like, life shakes out every day. Sometimes things go our way and sometimes things don't happen our way. But the more you can be mindful and intentional about it, the better it is going to be. So that's absolutely incredible that you guys are doing that together.
Yeah. And one area that we have found that's really helped in that space is obviously, once in a while, at least once or twice a week, I take my daughter for like a 2 to 3 hour period and we get outside if possible. So our daughter's getting fresh air and some sun. And, we go see the lake and the ducks and all that fun stuff. And, my wife has her space. And now what we're starting to integrate based off of her desire, the same thing. She's cultivated her work around her own fulfillment, her her soul expression. And we are carving out more time and space for her to do her work, which it sounds like that would be counter to what we're talking about. But us carving out time for her to work with one client a week, it fills up her cup. So it's overflowing. It's very much working with women, serving women. So that's something that is not like the be all end all solution, but it's really, really helped us in that space.
Right. Yeah. There's so much to be said for getting your cup filled. And that's one of the things that I talk to moms about. Actually, the last podcast I recorded was about community and social connection, because it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And, even though we are kind of highly connected through technology, we aren't getting, you don't really get your cup filled in the same way as you do when you're working with somebody, kind of one-on-one, or, when you meet somebody in the flesh. So that's amazing that she's able to do that at this, especially with your daughter being so young. Love that. And so the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give to husbands on supporting their wives during this transition time? And are there any nuggets that you would give to couples together on kind of really supporting and seeing each other during this transition?
I'll start with a husband. And to give context, I've been doing quote unquote men's work for the past 5 or 6 years. And that's been a big contributing factor to the person or the man that I am today. So if a man is about to enter into an environment where he's going to become a father, whether he's going to be going through a pregnancy journey with his partner, I would recommend seeking out a men's group of some kind in some capacity. You can find it online, or there's probably something that's happening in person in your city. And it's going to seem like you're taking even more time away from your nest, from your home environment. But it's so important that the man goes out around other men who are desiring to be in the healthy expression of the masculine and calling each other to that space. So when I am able to do that, and I've been doing that for a while, I have an understanding of who I am as a man, what it feels like for me to be grounded and to hold that space. So when I come back into the environment of my wife, which, the feminine is like beautifully, naturally chaotic, I have an anchor point. I have something that will allow the nest to not blow away in the wind. And if you can cultivate that energy, which is just this real integrity or this knowingness inside of yourself, you can always come back there. And you can be the place where the storm can come, the emotions can come, and things will be okay. And if you're able to do that and regulate your nervous system, and there's lots of different ways you can expand that space, breath work, cold exposure, different men's work activities. If you're able to regulate your nervous system when your wife's nervous system may be unregulated, and help be an anchor to bring the nervous systems back into coherence, I think that's one of the most beautiful gifts you can give your wife,
right,
your partner, or your family.
Be that grounding force, that rock. That's amazing.
Yeah. I would also say that there's a lot of focus in what I just said on being this like stable, stoic man, this anchor, this immovable force. And what your wife doesn't want is for you to become a statue, right? Because she still wants you to be playful. She still wants you to be expressive. So it is a bit of a balancing act. But there is one book that I would recommend, which is called The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which is the 4 key masculine archetypes. And when they are all integrated in a healthy way, you can tap into different versions of yourself, right? You can be fun and playful and creative, and then still switch into your, okay, I'll go and get things done, or I'll hold the space down. I wanted to mention that so there's not a man listening out there that feels like it's a cross or a heavy burden that he has to bear and begrudgingly just holds down the fort. It's a real gift to choose that role, and it's not being forced upon you. You're not a victim of that space. You are choosing it. You are choosing this responsibility. And in that comes so much power and so much self-pride and fulfillment.
Love that. I think it's important that you're bringing up such a huge piece of the puzzle is the men's groups, and men just supporting men, because I think, again, there's so many narratives societally that were fed from the time we're born, men need to be this way. And, I think that the more that men can connect with and relate to other men in a positive way, the better off it's going to translate for women and children and families, and that is so huge. And thank you for bringing up that book, because I've never heard of that book. So I'm going to go check it out, have my husband read it.
Yeah, it's one of those books too that is powerful for a woman to read as well, because there is an inverse correlation with, the king would be the queen. There is the feminine side of those archetypes. But yeah, getting around men who are honestly striving to be in that healthy expression of the masculine, I can see looking back, because Dan and I were part of the same men's group for a while. And for those listening, I'm referencing Dan Harrison. And I feel so lucky and blessed that he had a daughter before me. So I got to see that journey for him. I got to hear about what it was like for him and his wife and integrate a daughter into his life. And that, along with a couple of other, one of my other good friends, Cam, same thing. He had a child a couple years before we did. And to have a couple of those examples, consciously or subconsciously, I believe had such a profound impact on me and my ability to show up. And then hopefully I can, start to do that for other men as well. And you could see the importance of community, of us going in and sharing those energies and spaces and tools, tips and codes with each other. And, one man alone will almost always, he'll probably get by. I'll use the wolf pack analogy. The lone wolf will find a way to survive and the pack will find a way to thrive. And, if you're blessed enough to find a group of strong men that you can go to and you can learn and contribute and serve them as well as receive, I think that's one of the best things you can do for your family.
I love that. Thank you so much. You have such an enlightening and refreshing point of view of, not just, being a father and, a member of a family, but just, a human being. And that's why I wanted to talk with you, because I love the energy and the ideas that you're bringing to the world. You're talking about, holding the space for your wife and, being, flexible in who you need to be for her and your family, and also helping her meet her needs while you meet your needs too. So you can both grow as humans and as a family and create, a beautiful foundation. So thank you so much for visiting with us today. I'm so excited for the world to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me on. And, I see a lot of that unique perspective or thinking that you bring to the world. It's probably why we connect so easily, or, we're so easily friends. And one thing that you mentioned there, which might be a good place to leave off, which would be good advice for men and women, for fathers and mothers, is when we get called into this journey of partnership or of being a parent, I think that there's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of books of what you should do and who you should be. And I think the journey is less, being called to change who you are into someone better. And it's more removing the layers to become who you already are. Like, if I'm speaking to the fathers and to the men, you already are an anchor. You already are a grounding force naturally. You can't not be. That's your nature. But sometimes there's layers on top of that where we have become quote unquote nice guys, or, we've not become true to our nature anymore. And so it's less about becoming something you're not and more about remembering your true essence. A mother knows how to mother. She knows how to nurture. She is already pure love. She can't do that wrong. The only thing that a father or mother could do is forget that essence and stray from it based off of, nothing usually that's our fault. It's usually examples that we've seen from other people in the world or our parents or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think that's really helpful to remember, is that all of us already are amazing parents. We already are amazing men and women. And it's just a remembrance, a recalling into that essence and bringing that to life every day.
Right. No, I think that is a great point. And that's something that I tell moms that I'm working with, is that, so often you have the guilt and you might feel bad about yourself, but you really, really shouldn't. You are everything that you can be in that moment. And if you're striving to, grow and be a better person, then, that's all you can ask for. We're all humans and we're all in this, big meat suit journey together, right? It's one big experiment. And, like you said, it's a lot of it is giving yourself grace and knowing that, all of the tools are within. And sometimes it is a little bit of overcoming subconscious programming that may, have been gifted to us as children, right? So, well, thank you so much, Alexandra. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for doing this meat suit journey alongside me.
Thanks, Alexander. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.